Hi everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Unmistakable. Today we are in the beautiful Copenhagen with Frederik Uldall. We had the honor and pleasure to spend one all day with him yesterday to prepare the interview of today, so I'm really looking forward to it. So Frederik Uldall was a founding member of Exopolitics Denmark in 2007, later renamed UFO Denmark. He's also the author of the book Life in the Universe, Is It Visiting Us? Which is a great question. So let us know a little bit about yourself. We know that you are an occasional co-host on
UFOrklarligt, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Which means inexplicable in English.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the help. And most of all, you are a disclosure advocate and activist since 2007. So
yes, that's correct.
Just want to give you time to expand a little bit on yourself.
Yes, I think I've been interested in the UFO phenomenon since the zeros. I think in the middle of the zeros, maybe in 2005, 2006, I lived in London, in Streatham Hill, near Brixton, and then all of a sudden I saw that it was a time when the internet was quite new, and we just had this new bandwidth to play with.
Yeah.
So by accident, I think I saw the Disclosure Project's press conference from May of 2001. And it really struck me that there were all these witnesses, all these military witnesses stepping forward. I think Stephen Greer had maybe 20 of them or so on stage. And I thought, okay, all of these, if just one of these people are right about his or her episode, I mean, then there's something really interesting going on here. I didn't maybe agree with everything in that press conference. They were trying to put a lot of things into that press conference. Maybe they should have just made a more focused press conference just on the disclosure of that something being there. That was in that conference, there was kind of this undertone or this connotations of kind of an extraterrestrial presence. Now we are kind of more talking about an NHI. So the hypotheses there are several hypotheses now, but at that time that was kind of the extraterrestrial hypothesis that was really in focus. But that really, I think, got me started. And also Bob Salers, one of the nuclear witnesses, one of the veterans that's also in this book that's behind it, was at that press conference. So that was also very, very interesting to me. So what I think I did was I started an organization in Denmark called Exopolitics Denmark, and it was kind of really embedded in this structure that the activist Stephen Bassett had made. He had made this Exopolitics World Network. So there were a lot of different countries hopping onto this activist bandwagon at that moment. So we got Exopolitics Germany, for example, Robert Fleischer, and Francisco in the Exopolitics Portugal. So there were a lot of countries starting up these initiatives at that moment. So that started also to attract more and more members to the organization in Denmark. And I started going to conferences. At that time, I went to the X conference that Stephen Bassett set up in 2008, 9, and 10. And there were also some conferences in Rome, actually, the country where you come from, where James Fox was. The first conference I went to was with James Fox, where he was a keynote speaker in 2007 in Rome. And he just released his movie or his documentary out of the blue at that point in time. And Paola Harris was also instrumental, Italian-American researcher. She was instrumental in setting that conference. And later on, there was a big conference in Sitges in Barcelona, where a lot of the activists came to that conference. I think maybe 1,000 people or so, something like that, attended that conference in Barcelona. So at that time, there was kind of this feeling of activism, and we want the truth to come out. And this exopolitical movement was quite there was a peak of interest at that point in time. Later on, I think it became apparent that it was very, very difficult to get politicians to engage in this topic. But later on, I mean, in 2017, this article came out in the New York Times, Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal and Helene Cooper, and that really also set things in motion. And we learned that there was this HSIT program, ORSAT program, in the Pentagon investigating UFOs, and that made it more legitimate to talk about this subject. So there has been in the meantime through the years a sea change when it comes to this topic. People are taking it more serious now than in the zeros when I started engaging in the topic. So everybody kind of jumps into the topic at some point of time, right? and try to engage it where they are and with the background that they come from, what they have with them. And my background is really social science. I've studied human geography and political science, so I'm really interested in a lot of the social science aspects of the UFO phenomenon.
Yeah, which are actually very important, I think. They're probably less bombastic as in terms of breaking news and information that we all want about this NHI and extraterrestrial visiting Earth. But I think probably in a second phase after confirmation, public confirmation,
yes,
those will be really important aspects that we should really tackle down, you know. Let's talk a little bit about Denmark. I'm very curious also to know how the situation here, how's public perception, institutional treatment of the subject, if any, media representation, and have you seen any change?
Oh yes, I think I've seen a lot of change going on, especially maybe during the last couple of 3 or 4 years. There has really been a change in the public perception of this in Denmark. I mean, when I came into the subject in the series, it was extremely difficult to get politicians and journalists engaged. I mean, they're just running your head into a wall. I mean, it was so difficult. But now it's more that some of the taboo and stigma has been taken away from the subject during the last couple of years, and the explanation for that is probably the New York Times article and Danish newspapers every once in a while bringing an article about this. Every time there's something new going on in Washington, which is a lot of going on in the moment. I mean, the Danish media also covered the David Grush story, the whistleblower. But I think one of the main reasons is that it's become more straight mainstream in Denmark. There's a guy named Frederik Uldall, and he has a podcast on the Danish national radio. And it has a lot of listeners, and he's interviewing all the people in the field, or a lot of people in the field, and he does a really great job with interviewing all these people. So, and it has a lot of listeners. So that's one of the main reasons why people are much more relaxed talking about this subject. Not many people are interested in the subject, but it gets a lot of downloads. And then there's also another podcast that I'm a co-host on every once in a while, and Martin Kleist, he has that podcast called UFOrklarligt, which means inexplicable in English, and he's also interviewing a lot of people and has a slightly different angle on the subject. But more podcasts will come in Denmark about this. More journalists will start to cover it in Denmark. So I think there has also been a sea change in Denmark regarding this subject. I mean, people are much more open to it now than they were like kind of 10 or 15 years ago, or maybe it's not ridiculed in the same way anymore. And I know I have a friend that's a psychologist, and been the head of the department at the psychology in Copenhagen, and he's very open to the subject as well. I mean, he's very interested in it. Not that he's drawing any conclusions about it, but he's interested. I mean, Danish academics are getting more interested in the subject, so this is a really good thing. And this is what my activism has also been about: getting journalists and politicians interested in this, and just addressing it and talking about it. They don't have to draw conclusions to begin with, but there is something out there that's going on.
Of course, that's for sure. And it deserves attention, it deserves study, and of course. So, I'm very glad actually to know that Denmark has achieved a special, I guess, position in Europe, because not all countries treat the phenomenon, and medias are not really depicting the stories the way they should. For example, in Spain, I live in Spain, I can bring that testimony. The David Grush story didn't really break into the news. You know, it made feeble appearances, but also not really stressing the very important point about it. In Italy, it was communicated in a very wrong way. You know, it's like more just presuming that it's not a serious thing or something like that. So it's very nice to know that at least you're here.
But then again, it goes away. I mean, the story is
of course.
The news cycle is not very long. I mean, the story is out there and it goes on for maybe a day or two or something like that, and then it disappears. But more will happen in 24, I think.
Everybody says that and expect that. So I'm pretty sure. So let's just jump to another topic, you know. And in 2013, you invited Robert Hastings. That I think all of our listeners knows, but is the author of UFOs and Nukes. The book that we have here, which is probably one of the most important, if not the most important book on the topic, you know. And I know that you are very interested in this aspect. You had the chance to speak with him and to invite him here. So would you like to tell us a little bit about him, just a small introduction?
Yes, Robert Hastings is one of my favorite UFO researchers, without a doubt. I mean, he's very meticulous, and he has interviewed, I think, the number keeps growing. I mean, the last time I looked, it's maybe around 170 veterans, nuclear veterans that have been worked with in the close proximity of nuclear materials especially during the Cold War. I can't remember the number exactly. He would have to say that. But he has been at this project for more than 40 years, since the beginning of the 70s. And he has collected a lot of documents and, of course, interviewed a lot of these veterans that have had UFO experiences in their capacity of working with nuclear materials. So especially these ICBM officers, missileers, who are sitting in these capsules like 60 feet underground during the Cold War, for example, during the 60s and the 70s, with the keys. When they turn them, they launch the missiles towards the former Soviet Union. So these are very, very serious people, and there are a lot of these people who are stepping forward and talking about their experiences with UFO incursions at these nuclear weapon sites. And in a lot of cases, these nuclear missiles have been shot down. Most of the cases, they are malfunctioning as these UFOs appear over the launch control facilities or directly over the independent missiles, which are separated typically miles apart. So you have this launch control facility where these missileers, they're sitting in the capsule below ground, and then this launch control facility is connected to a lot of missiles that are separated in a huge area above ground. So what will typically happen is that these topside guards will observe a UFO hovering over a missile or hovering over the launch control facility, and they are quite frightened by this these incursions, and they call the officers or their commanding officers below ground and tell them that there's a UFO hovering above the missile, and then the missiles typically start malfunctioning. So there are several examples of this happening. And in a few instances, for example, at Minot Air Force Base in around 66, 67, a guy named David Schur, he told about also UFO moving from missile to missile, and they were getting these kind of erratic indications on these missiles, and they were also about the launch sequence had been started, so they had to throw this inhibit switch in order for the missiles not to launch towards the Soviet Union. And this launch sequence had also been started as an example in 1982 in Ukraine, also an ICBM site in the former Soviet Republic. So these are very, very serious instances of UFO episodes that I think that everybody should be interested in. I mean, not everybody should be interested in UFOs. It's for nerds like us, right? But the instances where there is a connection between UFOs and nuclear weapons, and that concerns the entire human race, I think. We have a need to know what is going on at these nuclear weapon sites. And it's just not nuclear ICBM site that this is happening. We also have these incursions at Los Alamos, where the weapons were actually researched and developed in the beginning, and around 1945. We have FBI documents showing that there were a lot of UFO sightings near Los Alamos and above Los Alamos. Later on at this is Sandia base, where actually Robert Hastings was born in 1950. We also have documents showing that UFO incursions were also happening there. This is Sandia base, is also in New Mexico near Albuquerque. And this is where they were assembled. And later on, these nuclear weapons, they were stored at a place called Killeen Base in Texas. And there we also have documents showing that there were UFO incursions there at the Killeen Base in Camp Hood in Texas. And we also have examples of one of these three plants where the nuclear material was produced, which is the Hanford site in Washington State, and the Oak Ridge National Lab in Tennessee, and the Savannah River plant in South Carolina. We also have plenty of examples of UFO incursions at those places. And these are places with high security. There are no-fly zones. And so what's going on at these places? And we also have these incursions at the test sites in the Pacific Ocean near the Marshall Islands, these atolls, the Bikini Atoll, the Eniwetok Atoll, the Kwajalein Atoll. We have these huge H-bombs going on, tests going on in the 50s. For example, Castle Bravo was an exercise, a huge nuclear bomb that exploded. And you see these UFOs circling around the mushroom clouds after a nuclear explosion. Yeah. And also at the Denmark test site, where also we had normal fission nuclear bombs, but also small thermonuclear weapons. And there we also have examples of lots of military people seeing UFOs coming down to the test site during in the time during the explosion and flying away afterwards. So this, I think, is a very interesting aspect of the UFO phenomenon that everybody, the whole entire planet, needs to know about. Who is tampering with the nuclear weapons? Yeah. And what's going on there? I don't have the answer to it. I'm not claiming that this is extraterrestrial or what it is, but somebody apparently has some extremely advanced technology tampering with the nukes, most of the time disabling them, possibly observing them, monitoring what are our capabilities, because sometimes it's apparent that a study been made by a guy named Larry Hancock from the SCU, the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, and his study really shows that every time there's kind of a change in what we do with nuclear weapons, then the UFO activity will be on the rise. So there's an extremely interesting period from 1948 to 51 where we see a window of heightened UFO activity, and it really disappears afterwards. But then it starts again at the time we place these nuclear weapons on missiles. Yeah. And then there's a period where there's not so much activity, but then again in the 70s, when we start to put multiple warheads on these Minuteman III missiles, then we start seeing an increased activity again. So
that's a very interesting.
Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect. So, and there's also another site called the Pantex site, and we don't see an increased activity, UFO activity at that site.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, actually, of course, it is clear that there's an intelligence that possesses a technology that is really far beyond what we had in 40s and 50s. That's for sure. And actually, it has been doing this since then. Now we are in 2024. It seems that every time we have a breakthrough or we are testing something new, they just show up. So it is, of course, impossible to say who they are, who they come from, but it looks more and more likely they are not coming from here. I mean, they are not coming from anything we know, at least.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Unless they are kind of Michael Masters, he has this hypothesis that it's actually us coming from the future. Then it is us. But then you could say it's so different us that it's not us. I mean, it's just I don't know if I entertain that hypothesis very much, but it's interesting. I'm open towards it, and I mean, I'm more open to it now than I was 10 or 15 years ago. My view of this phenomenon has also changed through the years. I mean, it's people say, oh, is it extraterrestrial? Is it interdimensional? Is it extratemporal? Is it ultra-terrestrials? What is it? I mean, basically, I don't think I know, but I think maybe it's all of the above. I mean, some people often say that. So if you think about it, let's say that it is ETs. I mean, coming from another star somewhere in the galaxy, then there would maybe have to be some kind of interdimensional aspect to it, because you can't traverse these distances just by regular normal physics. You have to jump into another dimension and then jump out at a certain point of a certain place in the universe. I don't know. This is just pure speculation, but it could be many things because the phenomenon is also so diverse. I mean, you see UFOs they come in all different shapes and sizes. So maybe it's many things. Maybe we have to seek the explanations in many places.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things for me is that they seem to share, even despite all the differences in shapes and in behavior somehow, they seem to share some very core characteristic. For example, their technology usually almost all the time they don't produce any sound. For example, they seem to move to have instant acceleration. The ability of hovering, and stopping just in a blink of an eye. To they have transmedium capacity. So that's to me is very interesting from a scientific and also philosophical point of view. It seems that there's another form of energy, another form of propulsion that we just ignore the existence of, but it's there, and it seems to be shared by. If there are different origins for this phenomenon, it seems to be shared by some people.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw these flight characteristics. We saw them in the 40s, but we're also seeing them today. Exactly. I mean, in some ways, the phenomenon has not really changed. I mean, absolutely, our perceptions has changed tremendously, and it provokes human curiosity tremendously, I think.
Yeah, and what really struck me, for example, was I remember I talked about this with Kevin Knuth.
Yes, great interview, by the way.
Thank you very much. He's a great guest. Yes, it's very easy. Yeah. And for example, when I remember when I was watching Close Encounter of the Third Kind, all of these phenomenon, let's say paranormal activities related to UFOs, they seem to me just like a just a trick, like a cinema trick to scare people, to create tension. But then I realized, okay, this phenomenon that seems very unexplicable at the time, now in 2024, science has actually answer for some of it, So it's the only phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, that basically it has not really evolved, but our understanding of it has evolved, and also our scientific understanding has evolved. So now we know, okay, that was not just a crazy idea. So it's something that we are planning to also to do as a human species, to send probes and to. So it's so interesting because it's really
but just by the fact that we know that planets are prevalent in the Milky Way galaxy. Yeah. There was in 95, I think, the first exoplanet was discovered, and now we have confirmed maybe several thousand, or maybe 5,000 or 3,000. I can't. The number just keeps on growing. Right? The astronomers are confirming more and more exoplanets all the time. So now it's very, very likely that planets are abundant in the universe, and we know that now, and we didn't know that in the 50s or the 60s. I mean, it was just pure speculation, but now we know that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny also, it's actually hilarious that the question is still in all the newspaper and all, TV shows, the question is, are we alone? Yeah. It's pretty sure that we are not alone.
Yeah. the interesting question, are they coming here?
Exactly.
This is what the question that should be asked all the time. Yeah. Who is it?
What are their intentions? Yes. Who are they? Who are their intentions?
Exactly.
What's the agenda? For example, what do you think about, let's talk about the agenda of the UFO and Nukes, if there are a possibility.
There are several hypotheses. I mean, Robert Hastings' speculation, I mean, his informed opinion, and that he keeps stressing that, is that of course humans are playing with fire. Stop that. I mean, we are threatening to destroy the whole planet or the ecosystem. Or is that a lifted finger? I mean, wagging finger to a small child? I mean, could be. I mean, but they might also be in their own interest if they want to inherit this planet. And if they've been here before, the human race, we don't know that. I mean, they could have, in theory, have been here long before we were here. Yeah. So what is their agenda with that? Maybe one of my speculation is that they have been observing us for a long time. Now they know we have nuclear weapons. They can see that we are developing space technology. Maybe they can see, and also now with all this AI and all these things, that we are on the verge of maybe developing interstellar travel capacity. Yeah. Maybe we are on the verge of cracking the code of interstellar travel. And that technology combined with nuclear weapons will create a problem for them. We could take this technology of nuclear weapons into their backyard. So this is just only pure speculation on my part. That could be one explanation why they are actually telling us, we can shut down your nuclear weapons. We can start them up. They don't mean anything to us. You have to keep that in check. You're not allowed to take this technology into the universe. This actually, I think, also was one of the themes of this movie called, what was it called? The Earth Stood Still.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an old movie, which was refilmed in 2008, I think, with Keanu Reeves. So that could be an explanation. I don't know. But I think it's safe to say that it's a fact that there is these UFO incursions at nuclear weapon sites, and that has been established without any doubt in my mind. Yeah. It's so well documented, and if people want to get interested in this, they should read Robert Hastings' book UFOs and Nukes, which you have placed right here. Excellent choice. And and he also has a documentary, UFOs and Nukes, the secret link revealed, which came out in 2016, I think. There's also his press conference from 2010, the 27th of September 2010, at the National Press Club, which can also be seen on YouTube, where he has maybe 6 or 7 veterans there, which was live streamed to CNN. Also go and watch that. George Knapp, the journalist from Nevada, he has also covered this topic extensively. You can also see a lot of news clips with him talking about the UFOs and Nukes. And then there's Larry Hancock, the guy that made the scientific paper, which is probably in pre-publication at the moment, but I suppose it's going to be peer-reviewed at some point and come out as a peer-reviewed paper. Also a very interesting read, actually establishing the connection between UFOs and Nukes. And actually he has these maybe 590 cases of UFOs near nuclear weapon sites. And he also compares these sightings or these episodes to a control group where you have military sites that do not have nuclear weapons, or aerospace companies or places where they develop rocket technology. So he can actually see that there is a heightened activity around these nuclear sites compared to a control group, which is also very interesting. So,
Yeah, and actually one of my favorite stories and favorite character is Bob Jacobs.
Oh yeah,
so
also interesting case.
Okay. So you wanna expand a little bit on that? Or?
Yeah, we can both do it.
Of course,
because you love the case as well. Bob Jacobs, he was a photo instrumental officer at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and I can't remember the year in the 60s. Maybe it was 64, 65.
Yeah,
people can look that up.
Yes.
But his task was to actually film and make a side view of an Atlas missile being launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base over the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. And he was filming this, and after the episode, after he had filmed the launch, which went well, he was called into his superior officer, Florence Mansman's office, where he had set up a film projector where he displayed or showed the launch that Jacobs and his crew had filmed. Yeah. And into the frame flies like a classical flying saucer, and it circles the warhead and shoots, I think, maybe 4 beams of light at the warhead, and the warhead tumbles out of subspace. Yeah. And all this is going on maybe with several thousand miles per hour over the Pacific Ocean. So Florence Mansman says to Bob Jacobs, "Were you guys screwing around up there?" No, sir, they weren't. And he was sworn to secrecy. And there were these 2 guys, possibly CIA spooks, in the room, and they took the film. And Bob Jacobs was ordered not to speak about this, but he eventually did. Yeah. I mean, and had been a period of in the 80s, I think, where he was harassed, and also he was encouraged not to. Not a very pleasant fashion not to talk about this, but eventually he did. Yeah. I told the whole story.
No, it's great. It's great, actually. I remember his interview with Larry King.
Yes.
And that was really epic, and the way he also, because you can really see a very serious person, scientist, and also determined. I mean, if you see something like that, if you experience something like that, you don't want just people to, he's actually a little bit harsh, in his own.
No, you can feel the anger in Bob Jacobs, and I would be angry too. Absolutely. I mean, he wants to tell. He's told this story, and he's very courageous, and I'm extremely pleased that he stepped forward with this.
Absolutely.
So that's a good thing, and I think he's also been interviewed by Arrow, the Pentagon's current.
Exactly.
UFO investigation.
That was the next question. Yes. So thanks for introducing it.
So some of these, I know that Robert Hastings has been in dialogue also with Arrow and Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the former head of the Arrow, the Pentagon's UFO office. And I know for a fact that they have interviewed at least Bob Salas and also Bob Jacobs. Mm-hmm. And maybe also a guy named David Shindley. I'm not quite sure about that. People will have to look that up. But the thing is that Arrow have begun to take an interest in these atomic nuclear veterans and interviewing them. So now we just had the first report that came out, which was really a disappointment in my view. But some people are saying the part 2 will also contain information about this UFO nuclear connection. So we're waiting at this point in time where we're shooting this interview. We're waiting for that second part of the report. and hopefully that will be a little bit better. But I have my doubts.
Yeah, me too. Especially because since the conclusion of the first are that most sightings are misinterpretation and no evidence of ET tech, biologic, of course, recovery, no evidence of any crash retrieval program. So they actually basically deny anything that was put on the table. It's a total whitewash,
that report. The PR people of the Pentagon have come out with stories like this before. I mean, people who follow it's the
same old story.
It's the same old story. We've heard this before from the Pentagon, and what they say, they found no evidence of extraterrestrial presence. But at this point in time, we're talking about NHI, non-human intelligence. So it could be, okay, maybe they didn't look, maybe they didn't have the Title 50 access to actually really dig into this. I mean,
that's what's thought.
They're not mentioning David Grush, for example, in this report. So they probably just called aerospace companies and say, hey, do you have a UFO in your hangar outside? Well, no, we don't have it. Yeah. So okay, fine. And that's the conclusion of that. I mean, there are so many first-hand witnesses behind the stage at the moment, waiting to step forward. And this is probably what we're going to see in 24, more of these witnesses coming forward. And I know as we speak, like Representative Burleson just yesterday or the day before, now they're trying to establish a select committee in the House to deal with UAPs. So they want some more hearings. So actually the politicians in the United States, in the House and also in the Senate, they don't trust Aero and the Pentagon. So there is this clash in the United States government between these two entities. It will be interesting to see what happens in 24 with this.
Yeah, and like you said, one aspect that is always underestimated is the war games that are always taking place around this topic. You know, people, wars are generally speaking the most for people the most easy, soft, and useless thing in the world. But as a matter of fact, they are the most powerful thing. Propaganda is made with words. Yeah. War are made with words. Hate is created by words. So actually, words are probably the most fearful weapon in human history.
There's a lot of power in words and how you use them.
Exactly, how you use them, and actually to generate a consensus, to create a mindset or something. And in this case, we are always hearing these no proof of extraterrestrial. So because everybody now thinks that extraterrestrial means interplanetary, means ETs. In the like we meant in the 70s, in the movie. So we expect to see ET coming out. So there's no evidence of that, and like you say, NHI is a much broader term. And I also love a lot what you said about it's very difficult now to reduce whatever they are to something like this, because they may be, of course, they may have some interdimensional aspect and also intertemporal aspect, because, of course, if they are able to travel so fast, they and maybe manipulate time and space, that's already a difference in the time in the time layer they are, and it's not the same thing that we are. Instead of just thinking we are us from the future, Somehow, I mean, of course, we don't need. There are all hypotheses that needs to be put on the table and respected, and of course, we need to be open-minded, because it could be whatever, or a mixture of whatever.
Could be a lot of things. My suspicion is that several explanations for this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I also think the same. There are too many differences, and why should be? I mean, if there is life in a universe like we know, I mean, now we have science is convinced of that. Basically, we don't know what kind of life, so it's very silly to just try to reduce it to there's somebody like us, but on a different planet. But.
But to me, the ETH extraterrestrial hypothesis is still on the table for me. But I think I now, compared to 15 years ago, I have a more nuanced view. I mean, there are other aspects to this. I mean, a temporal aspect to it as well, and an interdimensional aspect to it as well. I mean, it could be, or maybe with the nuke, some people say, okay, every time we set off a nuke, we disturb another dimension. I mean, who knows? I mean, they might be very extremely irritated by a hydrogen bomb going on in the Pacific.
That would be actually a good clue on, interesting stuff to investigate.
Yeah.
And I'm also, since you also mentioned some cases, not only related with nukes, but another interesting phenomenon is USOs, for example. And the capacity of these, devices to actually travel in a transmedium way.
It's extremely fascinating.
Yeah, and actually talking about Denmark, there's a very important case.
Yes, that reminds me of there was a case from 1952, which was also a very memorable year when it came to UFOs. We had this UFO flag over Washington, D.C., and it was also during the period of the heightened activity with the nukes in the United States. But in that year, there was something called the Operation Mainbrace, which was a huge NATO naval exercise, which took place especially in the North Sea and the waters around Denmark and Norway. And I think it was the biggest exercise that NATO had really done after the Second World War ended. And you had maybe 200 ships, and maybe you had 1,000 planes and 80,000 men. I can't remember the numbers, but it was a huge exercise. Yeah. And that is really one of the things, actually, I think it's one of the most interesting things when it comes to UFO episodes in Denmark. There was a destroyer or small naval ship in the Baltic Sea near an island called Bornholm. And it was in 1952 in September, I believe, where the crew of this destroyer, this naval Danish warship, saw a triangular-shaped UFO move very close to the fleet and flying maybe 1,500 kilometers per hour and changing direction in a rapid way. And I think there were 3 officers from the Karup airfield in Jutland who also saw a silver disc at that moment. And there was also several British pilots seeing UFOs during that naval exercise, and also an episode where a UFO or a USO, you could say, emerged from the ocean and flew away. So you have these USO experiences as well, and I know that Richard Dolan is actually writing a book, or maybe he's already published this, US historian, who's very knows a lot about USOs. So if people are interested in USOs, go to the work of Richard Dolan. And I know also of an episode in 1945 during the Second World War, or maybe around the close of the Second World War, in the north of the Pacific Ocean near the Aleutian Islands, where maybe 14 sailors or something from a Navy ship called the Delrov, they saw a dark sphere emerge from the ocean and circle the ship and flew away. So there are many of these warships that actually also encounter UFOs. Also warships that I know there is an episode with the Atomic Energy Commission's flagship called USS Curtis around the Castle Bravo explosion, or the test during the atomic testing in the Pacific Ocean, that also saw a UFO. It was not immersed in the ocean, but it flew over this Atomic Energy Commission's flagship, which actually was a ship that transported some of the hydrogen bombs to the Eniwetok Atoll. And this flagship also had scientists from Los Alamos and the Sandia lab on it. And the log of this USS Curtis show that there was a UFO flying over that ship as well. So there are examples of UFOs flying over the oceans and also coming in and out of the ocean, seemingly with not any problems whatsoever. And I know Louis Elizondo from ATP also has addressed this. So it's extremely fascinating aspect. So it's not just the air where it's going on, it's also in our oceans, which are huge, which covers around 70% of our planet. So
yeah, that's so interesting how arrogant we are, thinking that there's an explanation, an hypothesis like the NHI hypothesis is not on the table, when we really don't know almost anything about the place where we live, about we don't understand gravity, we don't understand our ocean, we don't know what's there, but still we are convinced that they must be like birds.
Exactly.
Drones. Even if in 47 there were no such drones like today. But now it's the new, actually drones are the new swamp gas of 2024, I think. So let's talk about the impact on society.
Yes, I think one of the main reasons for this secrecy is the technology. it's pretty obvious by now that somebody has this technology. I mean, David Grush has stepped forward. Yeah. These crash retrieval programs, they are real, in my opinion. There's no doubt about it. Even though that the Pentagon is saying otherwise. I mean, somebody has that technology. They might not know where it is. They might not. Some of them might not actually be in good faith and not lying. They're just not privy to that information. This is a deep state phenomenon, and this technology is most likely kept by and owned by defense contractors at this point in time. So a lot of the part of the indignation and my activism has revolved around the fact that somebody has their hand in the cookie jar, technological cookie jar, and they're not sharing that technology with the rest of us on this planet. Yeah. And that's unfair, in my opinion. No. I mean, this should not be happening in a democratic society. The Congress is not in the know about this technology. Why is this technology not being shared with the rest of us? And it's apparently when it has this performance that it has, I mean, then it's not running on fossil fuels. And the whole climate movement, they're not really addressing or getting into this subject. And they should. I mean, there could be, I'm not saying that it is a solution, but there could be a colossal solution to our environmental problem here. But it could also be very dangerous to introduce this technology into society. But we as a democratic society have to make that decision. It's not a select, small elite of white males in the United States, deep underground, that has to make that decision, should make that decision. It's a democratic decision.
To the world.
Exactly. Just like we are democratically deciding what to do with nuclear technology, for example. We know that nuclear technology is there. Everybody should not know how a nuclear bomb is made. I think that should be totally classified.
Absolutely.
But we have to make a decision in society democratically. Do we want to have nuclear power plants, for example? In Denmark, we don't have nuclear power plants. Yeah. In other countries, I don't know about Spain or Italy, there might be nuclear power plants there, but that's your decision. I mean, in the same way, this technology should be also, we should also decide what goes on with this technology. If it could be turned into something peaceful, it could solve our energy problem, perhaps. It could also think about it. If if this technology if it can replace aeroplanes, for example, you'll be able to fly around the globe almost instantly. Like you came here from Madrid to Copenhagen, and how much time did that take? Maybe 3 hours,
20 minutes.
You could be here in 2 minutes, right? So this is kind of the world change, the society change we're talking about when we are addressing this. We're talking about this technology, and that's a major change. It's a major shift in human affairs. What will happen to the borders of the entire planet? I mean, what will happen to if energy, also the energy source, which is in these craft, which energy becomes almost free, then what happens to all other prices in our society? It will just mean exponential economic growth, a totally new world that we cannot really forecast how it would be. So let's say that it was released. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but at some point, there's some of this technology that would be applied in society. And I think in my view, it should be introduced slowly, and it has to be introduced in a very thoughtful manner, because there is a lot of considerations that has to go into the application of very, very potent and powerful technology. And that is what we are talking about here. When you can fly thousands of miles per hour, stop on a dime, and then turn and fly in the other direction. I mean, this is not for kids. And I mean, also, when you think of it, if you combine this technology with other technologies, for example, nuclear weapons, for example, then you have what situation do you have then? So I understand why there are forces and interests that want to keep this under wraps, this technology. But I think we have, as a society, a democratic society, we should decide, the public should decide how should we introduce this technology into society. And my vision of the future is that maybe in 50, 100 years, 200 years, something like that, some of that technology will be in the public domain. In what form, I don't know. But it has to be brought out in a responsible way, in my opinion.
Yeah, of course.
And in this sense, we are not probably the best species. We demonstrate a capacity of turning everything
into a weapon.
Exactly. This can be a weapon. I mean,
exactly.
So it's like, especially.
And maybe it's already been done. Maybe these defense contractors already incorporated some of the principles of this technology into current aircraft. For example, the B-2 bomber. For example, there are rumors about this that actually there is a lift to that. Flying machine that is a bit exotic. I don't know about that. You have to get other historians and airspace historians into that, talk about that subject. I don't know much about it, but I would not be surprised if there has already been some applications of this.
Partial applications.
Yes, partial applications.
Well, and I also think that, I mean, of course, I can understand the preoccupation, because, of course, we are talking about technologies that can be weaponized and could be like 1,000 times more destructive than nuclear, weapons. So it's actually very. Actually, they would combine it with nuclear weapons probably, and but like you said, there's a core principle that can be used for creating a renewable form of energy, like a clean energy. There are actually it's very likely that this energy is probably clean, and it doesn't rely on, and even if it's not sure, it deserves our attention and investigation. And I also think that, in my opinion, it's very important that these NHI, and this technology is communicated somehow to the world, because it's the only thing that can change people's perception on their narrow reality somehow, but also on science and technology, because scientists seems to be really stuck with their own paradigms, and each one in his own small area, like everyone in every aspect of life. We all do this thing, and scientists are no different in that. But I think this could serve as a great inspiration and a moment of understanding of, okay, that's possible. And understanding that something is possible is going to change your life completely.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to accelerate progress. It's going to accelerate innovations and breakthroughs. Yeah. So it is really an important aspect that needs to be democratized.
Yes. And at the point where like a majority of scientists, they realize, or maybe it becomes accepted as legitimate knowledge that NHI is here and it's using this technology, then there are a lot of scientists that would say, okay, it is possible to do these things.
Exactly.
And that would open up a avenue of saying it's a new scientific inquiry. Say, okay, somebody figured it out. Maybe we can figure it out as well.
Exactly.
So that would be a huge change when there is a majority of scientists realizing that somebody's here with some very advanced toys.
Absolutely. Yeah, and actually, let's get into a complicated aspect of it, because the what is now called biologics.
Yes. Which basically, very sensitive, very sensitive.
Which basically means, David Grush talked about that and used this term. I remember at first it was even questioned, what's biologic means. They could be monkeys, but of course, biologic means beings, so physical entities of some kind, So, and it's very interesting to me. Apart from the energy, beside the energy aspect of it, the technological aspect, it's also what would be the impact of such discovery, because knowing another form of life, of course there are many forms of life on our planet too that we don't know them all. Actually, we are probably a form of life that we will discover, but somehow we get a clear picture now of what we are living with.
Yes,
and they all share some characteristics that are more or less similar to us and to our environment. And knowing a form of an NHI, non-human intelligence, a form of life which is completely different, would be probably a game changer for our
I think, first of all, the realization that there's other beings here, whatever they may be. Us from the future or from another planet or another dimension, it would put an end to the anthropocentric human worldview that we are kind of top of the food chain, the most advanced and most intelligent beings. That would end instantly. So unless you are some a religious fanatic or something that don't want to with the blinders down or anything, but most people would realize that, and hopefully it would put an end, or at least reduce the differences among humans. So we are not so focused on the differences between us, on race and different nationalities, the color of our skin, different religions, all these things that we focus on constantly, all the things that separates human beings, because now there will be something else that is even more different.
Absolutely.
so you come from Italy and Spain, and I come from Denmark, and I mean it's totally in the background when we know that there's another being that just looks intelligent being that's much more clever than us and looks completely different and thinks in a completely different way. Then it would maybe make the bond between different races and different human beings with different religions and different sexuality and different ideologies and political opinions, and bring us more together. Hopefully it would. But let's just not hope that it would just move that. So we would focus that aggression or that threatening otherness. We would focus that on the beings.
That's probably what.
That's the next aspect.
Yeah, I'm afraid. Like for example, I don't know if you ever saw the movie District 9.
Oh yes.
And that's a great,
very interesting movie.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great representation. The aliens are basically treated and confined as immigrants. Of course, there's a lot of violence and hatred against them. So it's like
in South Africa.
Exactly. It's like you said, like switching just the hatred and the discrimination towards another. Not actually making it disappear.
Yeah,
that would be the most obvious thing. But so I hope that's not the thing. But it's also that would have an impact, because probably they would. They could have a form that we don't understand, that we don't that we don't, that actually scares us.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of aspects that are very important, but somehow it's also an encounter with something totally new, and which I think human beings probably would need.
Yeah. Or maybe we would also be surprised that there's a lot of commonalities.
Absolutely.
I mean, that would be really interesting.
Absolutely.
So they also have feelings and have feelings of hate and joy and jealousy and all these human emotions. They also have them. And
absolutely.
so we can mirror ourselves in them, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I discussed this with Kevin Knuth. I really like this when he said, because for science, we are always thought that somebody coming from a distant planet should be totally different.
Yeah.
It shouldn't look like us. One of the main arguments against the extraterrestrial hypothesis, I remember in my early childhood, was actually all the alleged beings encountered by people. They look too anthropomorphic.
Yes.
They are like us. Why do they have two hands, two eyes? And actually, talking with Professor Knuth, he was actually showing me that sometimes there's a reason in things. So the fact that we have two hands, maybe to develop and build a spacecraft, you need two ends.
Yeah.
You need to stand. You need to have two eyes. And it was very funny when he said you can have the eyes, below
the mouth.
Below the mouth, otherwise the food would actually
fall into the eyes. Exactly.
And actually, it's a great point.
Yeah.
We never think about that, but it's probably that's the reason why. Also, maybe they would look exactly like people depict them. But I also so let's get into, if you like, let's also get into experiencers, for example, which is a sensitive topic.
It's a very sensitive topic, and many people are not comfortable talking about this. And I remember in the 80s, I think I was a teenager in the 80s, and by accident I opened the television, as you do as a teenager,
of course.
and I saw this book program on a Swedish channel that we have here in Denmark, and it was a book review program, and Whitley Strieber was on it.
Oh yeah.
And his book Communion had just come out, and he was talking about his experiences that he had in the 80s in his cabin in upstate New York. I can't remember where it is, and that made an impression on me. And I think this guy is obviously talking. He could be an actor, but I don't think he is. He's been at this for decades now, talking about his experiences. was NHI. I mean, I don't know if what his, I can't draw a conclusion about what he's experienced, but his relationship with these others has evolved through the years. That's my impression. It's not the same now as it was when he had his first experiences in the 80s. And what an interesting fact with this was also that he was inundated with a lot of letters from other experiences that were now comfortable talking about their experiences with beings that were apparently not human, which I also found very interesting. And then I also went to these conferences in the United States. I remember clearly at 3 conferences at Stephen Bass's conference, at the X conference in Washington. I talked to people, I won't name any names, but I talked to experiencers who were there. Very serious people, normal people, not mentally disturbed people, just normal people you could meet at your workplace. I mean, and they were very interested in making sense of this whole thing. I mean, you could feel that they've had these experiences, and sometimes they would open up about them, having experiences with beings at night in their bedroom, for example, or when they were driving, or other places in their daily lives. And this was often a recurring thing in their life, and had been going on in their life and also in their parents' life, and perhaps also in even their grandparents' life. So this phenomenon this is the abduction phenomenon that I'm talking about now. It seems to be something that runs in the family. If you experience it, it's very likely that your parent or their parents has also experienced it. So that made me very curious. I'm not an experiencer myself in that sense. I'm very driven with the subject, but I've not had encounters with beings like that. But I know people who have. I know a considerable amount of people I've been talking to have had these experiences, and they want answers, of course, and they can't always make sense of it. What's happening? They just know that this is real, and it's very prevalent. It's not only happening in the United States. It also goes on in other countries in the world. So it's an aspect, and some people are very, very disturbed by it. But I think there is a tendency that it changes their view of it, and their feelings surrounding the phenomenon. It changes through their life, and it impacts their life tremendously, of course. And it's very, very taboo. It's not something that people want to talk about at their workplace or a family reunion or something like that. It's very, very sensitive. Also because to some people it's extremely traumatic. I mean, think about it. You wake up in the middle of night and you have 3 or 4, you think, children standing in your bedroom, and then you realize these are not children. And you are paralyzed, and they're taking you somewhere, and they're doing things to you, and you're naked. Right? This topic is so sensitive and so taboo, and this is not something that is on the agenda in the U.S. Congress at the moment. But at some point in the future, it will be. Trust me about this. This is one of the steps down the line. Because once you have acknowledged this presence of this NHI, then people will start asking more questions. Okay, is this phenomenon real? What is happening to these people? And the authorities, maybe they have completely no control over this. This NHI is doing whatever they please to whatever the agenda is. And some people have the hypothesis that this is they are totally self-serving, and they have this hybrid agenda going on. I don't know anything about that. I mean, that's a hypothesis. I can't make any conclusions about this, but what I would say is that these people are not mentally ill. Well, some people are, of course, mentally ill. There are people in the world who see things
in any aspect of life. I mean,
obviously, but there are so many people that are normal people who have these experiences, and they are more and more of these people are starting to talk and be more open with these experiences. So there is something going on. But I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's ET or interdimensionals or whatever. And I don't want to draw any conclusions about what their agenda is. But something is going on.
And I don't know, for example, about you, but when I was young, I remember, I was watching, TV was not very informative in this aspect. They were, of course, broadcasting the most sensational stuff and actually trying to make stories out of nothing, and also I was reading books, but it was very difficult. There was no internet, so it was very difficult to see these persons actually to to hear them talking or watching like I don't know, 2, 3 hours, 4 hours interviews and collecting material about them. And it was impossible to know them. So my first reaction was, yeah, they must be crazy, to think like this. I didn't know anything about John Mack. John Mack.
Maybe you should just explain to the listeners.
Yeah, of course. John
Mack
was a Harvard psychiatrist who actually got interested into, and a Pulitzer Prize winner, and he got interested into the UAP phenomenon thanks to
Bob Hawkins.
Hawkins, exactly, and actually he started to interview, like started to get to know, let's say, patients, people who went to him to actually, they were really seeking for help in order to assimilate this experience. Most of them were relating stories, but they were hoping him to tell them that they were crazy, and to maybe give them a pill or something like a cure. Yeah. But when they were realizing, okay, this experience was real. I mean, there was nothing that John Mack could actually assess to say you didn't experience what you said. Whatever it is, whatever that means, it was clear to him that there were real experiences. And so that had a huge impact on me, of course, and I think on many people, because when a person like him, and I remember reading about him, but when I could finally see videos of him talking, get to know the person a little bit in a virtual sense, but you can really have lots of knowledge about somebody. Also, listening to him talking for hours and hours and hours, and I was really impressed because I said, okay, this is a real phenomenon. These people are actually very smart, very well balanced. They are highly functional people.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In most cases.
In most cases, they are. Yeah.
And they are also very straightforward. They are not just people who like to invent stories.
Exactly.
So
and a lot of these people, some of the skeptics claim that, oh well, you're extracting these stories and these experiences with hypnosis.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of people, they don't need hypnosis for this. They can just remember these experiences totally consciously, like we're sitting talking to each other now. I mean, suddenly there's just this being in the room, and something is happening, right? So it's not recovered with hypnosis all the time. I mean, it's many cases of that not being the case. So that makes it really, really interesting.
So talking about skeptics and debunkers, I think sometimes what struck me is that they seem to be in denial. Some of them, of course, healthy skepticism is needed in the conversation, and is a scientific trait. So it's simply very important. But non-informed skepticism is what creates many issues sometimes, and most of them seems to be in denial. Yes. More than simply skeptic, which is a different thing,
There has to be there's healthy skepticism, and there's also unhealthy skepticism.
Yeah, of course.
I have no problems with healthy skepticism, because you have
it's needed.
It's very much needed, and the fact that maybe 95 or 98% of all UFO sightings can be explained with prosaic. There are prosaic explanations to this. Of course there is, but we're not interested in all those cases.
Exactly.
But I would again say that it is important that there are skeptics out there also debunking all these. Yeah, because there are a lot of weird claims out there, and a lot of UFO experiences that can explain to down-to-earth things. Yeah. Of course there are, but sometimes people, they don't do their homework, and But if you go, for example, to the work of Robert Hastings, all these documents that he has recovered under the Freedom of Information Act, of course, there are documents that are disinformation, constructed by government disinformants trying to muddying the waters. We have examples of documents being fabricated with all kinds of weird stuff in them. But there are so many documents coming out telling more or less the same story. And there's so many of these witnesses, military witnesses, and you can establish their credentials, and they have their DD-2114. I can't remember the name of the code of these military papers that actually that they confirm that they've actually worked at these military bases, and they have a military career. Robert Hastings, one of the first things he asks people is, show me the paperwork that actually proves that you are a military witness and you have worked at this and this base. Maybe the document, it doesn't confirm that they've had this experience, of course, but it just establishes the fact that they are actually who they say they are.
Exactly.
And this also goes with David Grush, for example. We can establish that he is who he says he is, just not some random person that you take from the street.
Absolutely.
So there are so many of these people and so many of these documents now pointing to the fact that there is this extremely advanced technology in our skies and in our oceans. So as a society, we should now be asking, we're at the point where we have to ask ourselves in a democratic society, who are piloting these craft? Who is it? Yeah. There's somebody here that's apparently not us.
Yeah.
And why this is still not getting not so much attention. I mean, it's getting more attention, but still not. When you think about what this means and what impact it can have on society, then there should be more attention, still more attention on this subject.
Since you come from a social science background, do you think the social science, what is their role? What's the role of social scientists and also their importance, maybe after a confirmation comes?
I think maybe the social scientists social science could be used to analyze what the scenarios are for humanity. If this, for example, this technology, some of it is released into the public, how should we implement it in our society in a responsible way? What impacts will it have on our lives? Social science could be used to that. Are people being disturbed by this phenomenon, making analysis and research about how people react to this new world that we are entering at the moment? I think also social science can be used into that, making actually the social change more tolerable or making it more balanced. I think that social science can be used for that. So I think it's tremendously important to have social, and also the humanities could also come into the picture, and psychology, and that all kinds of academic fields that will get into this topic. And we are already seeing that also with, for example, the Seoul conference, which took place at the Stanford University in November of 23. I think you're starting to see science getting into this topic and actually dealing with it with a scientific method. And we need this interdisciplinary approach to this topic, I think. We need people from all different kinds of science backgrounds contributing in their way with their methodologies and their point of view to this topic, because it's so complicated, this topic, that we need all the best minds on it. And this is what I think very positively, and I'm very optimistic about, that the more scientists that are actually displaying or showing to the world that interested in, like people like Ken Knuth that you had on your podcast, and also Matthew Sidakis, for example, Avi Loeb, Gary Nolan, all these people. It's very, very important that they appear on podcasts and they start writing articles. They don't have to make any far-out claims or anything. They just have to use the scientific method and show that they can handle this subject in a responsible scientific way. And then more scientists will jump on the bandwagon. And this is what I think is needed. And this is also something that my activism has revolved around, getting scientists into the subject and engaging in it in their own way, of course. And we need all kinds of different scientific approaches, not only the social science and the humanities, but also the natural sciences, of course, all of them.
Yeah. And arts is also another.
Oh yeah. Which art is also one of my favorite topics. So a lot of artists just behind the camera, we were talking about the Spanish artist. Maybe you can talk about him a little bit. Or...
Well, I never introduced myself in interview because, of course, I want to focus on other guests. But I'm a musician. I've been a musician all my life, a composer, and then I also taught in a university and conservatory, like music composition, harmony, which doesn't mean music harmony. It's like basically physics of music.
Okay,
it's like the mathematical aspect, like in music theory, let's say, to create compositions, which actually many people ignore, that music is not just inspiration. It's just, but there's a science behind it, And actually, what is really interesting, for example, there's a lot of similarities, in my opinion. I wanted, for example, when I was young, I wanted to study physics. And since I come from a city which is from Italy, which is a very small town, focused on heavy duty, you know, and job, you know. It was not seen as a very effective career for me at the time, you know, to get into physics, you know, too abstract. So they say, okay, you need to go to study engineering. Then I tried, but I was a bit bored by it.
Okay.
and then I say, okay, I go from my other passion, which is linguistics and languages. And then I just, music was always my secret passion, you know. And then I say, okay, I want to also focus on music, which I see in a similar way, because language and music, actually music is a language, it's an abstract language, but I was always fascinated more by this aspect. Then I developed studying harmony and composition than necessarily the final result. So that was really something that really attracted me. And and many people don't know that actually also music has this kind of complex relation. And also what is really interesting for me is that music harmony is based on the tension and the tension of every single note towards a center, you know, which is actually basically gravity. It's actually the same law of gravity, you know, create tension and release a chord progression that needs to resolve. So it's very interesting. It's about movement, it's about energy. So it's really very inspiring. But apart from this, I think that art in general also had a special role. Actually, let's think about cinema, for example. Like films like Close Encounter of the Third Kind or District 9. You know, for example, they show aspect. They are not just tied to the film narrative. They want to make statements on reality. You know, they want people to think about reality and change their view, their worldview. Or another film that I really loved was Arrival.
Oh yeah, very interesting movie.
That's actually I wrote a review for UAP Education, which is on our website, so everybody can actually take a look at it. On the movies, and it's very interesting how this film is very conscious of the UAP phenomenon.
Oh yeah.
Even if it doesn't speak about Area 51 and government conspiracies, but it tackled the problem from a different point of view, like time, linguistics, language, which is very funny. And I found it very interesting that in the movie, in the film, there are basically two human characters, let's say, like a physicist and a linguistic, and
a female physicist.
Yeah, exactly. A female
in the lead role, which is also a development.
And she's the linguistic. She's
the main character.
Yeah, she's the main character. And then the other guy is actually the physicist, and they actually marry themselves. And it's also a marriage a metaphorical marriage, you know. And I think that it's very important that like art science and social scientists and humanities needs to marry themselves in order to really we need an interdisciplinary approach to understand this problem, because I think the UAP phenomenon scream by itself of interdisciplinary aspect. It's probably the only not the only, but one of the biggest phenomenon that is not understandable by just applying one lens. You know,
exactly.
So.
We need to look through several lenses.
Yeah,
and I find it very fascinating that people who've had experiences, they are also impelled to kind of to paint or to draw some aspects of their experiences. There is an American lady, I believe her name is Kim Carlsberg. She's published this book with a lot of different paintings from experiences. And it's very interesting to look at this art that comes out. And I also remember the first X conference I went to in 2008 in Washington, that Stephen Bassett, he hosted. There was a huge section in this Hilton Hotel just with paintings. A lot of artists just came with their paintings, which was inspired by some kind of aspect of the phenomenon, that they just made a gallery or displayed all the art that was there. And that was kind of another aspect of it. And I found that very fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
To look at it. I'm not too, I don't know much about art. It's not really my field, but I have a strong sense that this is a very, very important aspect, and also an aspect of how to communicate or acclimatize the whole humanity, our entire planet, to this phenomenon through art. all kinds of different art. I mean, paintings and movies, and now you're also talking about music, which makes me want to ask you: have you encountered any kind of link, or is there a connection between music and the phenomenon? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, I thought in many. There are some aspects that are probably interesting for both. Well, of course, it's not just by chance that, for example, in Close Encounter of the Third Kind, they communicate with music. That was a great choice.
Exactly, the 5 tones.
Yeah, exactly. and also in the film Arrival, for example, they don't communicate with music, but the language is like very visually and musically, very, like incredibly. It's actually visible. How can I say? Visually musical, So and I think that, of course, music has the power to express a very sophisticated idea without expressing them verbally. And sometimes, even if the audience doesn't understand the rules behind music, for example, to get to that point, they can feel it, they can experience it. So that, I think, is probably the most important thing. Maybe we will understand this phenomenon from an intellectual point of view, but maybe not. But we need more tools, you know. And one tools could be, okay, let's get get a grip of something, even if on a just emotional level and not straight intellectual level, and that could be done by arts, for example. I think that it's very powerful. When I see, for example, I don't remember the name of this girl, but the one of the witnesses of the Zimbabwe case, the aerial in the aerial phenomenon, she's the main character of the documentary, and she's a painter.
Child
exactly.
The being,
and exactly all of her life was basically, all of her artistic life was embedded into this experience. And it's very powerful when you see this art. It's like you understand that there's a lot of things, and somehow it can communicate. It can also make you living the experience a little bit. So I think it's also very important.
Which reminds me, there was a lady, I think Australian lady named Tracy Taylor. I think I mentioned her in my book, and I think the Australian researcher Mary Rodwell has been in contact with her, and I think she has had. I think maybe as far as I remember, Tracy Taylor is. I think that's her name. She had experiences with non-human intelligence, and she was inspired to make some really, really fascinating paintings. And I remember putting them in my book because I thought, okay, this is wild art. I mean, I loved it. I mean, when I'm looking at it, you just see, okay, this means something. I don't know what it is, but it has an impact on the person, I think, that looks at it.
Absolutely.
And also the fact that we have all these crop circles. I'm not saying that they are, a lot of them are, of course, made by humans, no doubt about that, because some of them are commercials, but there are some of the crop circles that are extremely complex, and they appear overnight. I mean, and looking at them, whoever made them, I mean, if it was human, whoever made them, it sets things in motion when you look at good art or something that is. So it's fascinating. I mean, and maybe it impacts our consciousness in some way, looking at these images. Who knows?
Well, sounds, for example, going back, because I didn't really answer your question, I just mentioned like some aspect of the relationship between music and the phenomenon. But for example, sound itself is a very powerful tool. I mean, and it can really affect our state of mind, our perception, our consciousness. So a musician and a sound designer, for example, I'm a sound designer, really knows this and enjoy this process. So even if it's not made on a rational level, probably there is a connection that escapes your rationality, And the other thing that probably arts oblige you to do, like many other things, I think, sports, and I think every things that is made, that requires your full attention to stay in the moment, It's a form of meditation. So somehow it can bring experiences that are not, of course, related necessarily to the UAP phenomenon, but that are related with consciousness.
Yes.
So that I would say is probably one of the most important aspect I can see, the most important similarities.
Yeah.
But I think that also with the general public, it could be really nice also if they, and I think that people really can enjoy not only books, so not only rational thoughts, scientific data, but
which is also of course
everything. I mean, I think that if we really want to understand this phenomenon, we need to use all means, because it's far too complex for us to understand. We just cannot just do it with science only, with humanities only, with sensor only, but we really need to stretch out to everything possible.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Frederik, it was a
pleasure
conversation.
And thank you so much for coming to Copenhagen. And it's been an honor.
Thank you very much for showing me around yesterday, and thank you for this great interview.
And maybe see you in Spain someday.
Absolutely. You are invited whenever you want.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.